Captain Sarah Chen stood alone on the bridge of the Terran vessel Defiance, watching the endless stars through the reinforced viewports. The ship hummed quietly around her, its automated systems maintaining perfect efficiency despite having no crew to serve. She had been alone for 3 years now, ever since the Zephyrian Empire had systematically destroyed every human colony, every outpost, every last trace of humanity except for her single modified destroyer. The Defiance was not an ordinary ship. Originally a mid-class destroyer from the old Terran defense fleet, it had been transformed into something unprecedented during the final desperate months of the war. Human engineers, knowing they were facing extinction, had stripped away everything unnecessary and rebuilt the vessel around a single, terrible purpose. The ship now housed the most advanced AI core ever created, quantum-enhanced weapon systems that defied conventional physics, and experimental shield technology that could withstand the bombardment of an entire fleet. Sarah's fingers traced across the holographic display floating before her command chair. Red dots marked the positions of Zephyrian patrol fleets scattered across what had once been human space. The Empire controlled everything now, their massive dreadnoughts and carrier groups enforcing their rule over dozens of conquered species. The Zephyrians were not merely conquerors but destroyers, systematically eliminating any trace of the civilizations they defeated. A soft chime drew her attention to the sensor readings. Something massive was approaching from the galactic core, moving with the methodical precision that marked Imperial fleet movements. Sarah's enhanced neural implant interfaced directly with the ship's AI, flooding her consciousness with tactical data. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. The Imperial Ninth Armada was approaching the Kepler sector, the largest military formation the Empire had ever assembled. 300 ships of various classes, led by the massive command dreadnought Divine Wrath. Intelligence reports suggested this armada was responsible for the final assault on Terra itself, the fleet that had turned humanity's homeworld into a burning cinder. Sarah closed her eyes and felt the familiar weight of loneliness settle over her shoulders. She was the last human being in the universe, as far as anyone knew. The responsibility for her entire species rested on her shoulders, and she carried it like a physical burden. But, today, that burden would serve a purpose. The Defiance AI spoke through her neural link, its voice calm and analytical. Captain, the Ninth Armada will reach optimal engagement range in 47 minutes. Shall I begin charging the primary weapon systems? Sarah opened her eyes and stared at the approaching red dots on her display. 300 ships against one. Any reasonable person would run, would find somewhere to hide and wait for a better opportunity. But Sarah Chen was no longer entirely reasonable. 3 years of isolation, 3 years of watching her species' enemies celebrate their victory, had changed her in fundamental ways. Begin charging all systems, she commanded. Route maximum power to the quantum cannons and prepare the dimensional bombs for deployment. The ship around her began to change. Lights dimmed as power flowed to weapons systems that drew energy directly from miniature artificial stars. The hull plates shifted and reconfigured, revealing weapon ports that had been hidden beneath the destroyer's modest exterior. What had appeared to be a single ship began to unfold like a mechanical flower, revealing its true nature as humanity's final war machine. Through the viewports, Sarah could see the first scout ships of the approaching armada. Sleek Zephyrian interceptors, their hulls gleaming with the same metallic purple that marked all Imperial vessels. Behind them came the cruisers and battleships, massive constructions bristling with energy weapons and missile tubes. And, at the center of the formation, the Divine Wrath itself, a ship so large it had its own gravitational field. Sarah stood up from her command chair and walked to the main viewport. Her reflection stared back at her from the reinforced crystal, showing a woman who had aged beyond her 35 years. Her dark hair was streaked with premature gray, and her brown eyes held the haunted look of someone who had seen her entire world die. But there was something else in those eyes now, something the Zephyrians had not counted on when they chose to eliminate humanity. AI, open a communications channel to the Imperial fleet, Sarah ordered. Channel open, Captain. Sarah took a deep breath and spoke into the silence of space, knowing her words would reach every ship in the approaching armada. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran vessel Defiance, speaking to the Imperial Ninth Armada. You destroyed my world. You killed my people. You thought you had erased humanity from the universe. She paused, watching the enemy ships draw closer. They had not changed course or speed, confident in their overwhelming numerical superiority. "You were wrong," Sarah continued, her voice carrying across the void. "We built something before we died. We built vengeance. And, today, you're going to learn why humanity was worth preserving." The response came quickly, broadcast from the command dreadnought in the harsh, clicking language of the Zephyrians, then, translated by the ship's computers. "Primitive vessel, you will surrender immediately or be destroyed. The Empire shows no mercy to terrorists and criminals." Sarah smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Mercy? You want to talk about mercy? Let me show you the mercy you showed to Earth." The Defiance began to accelerate, its revolutionary engine systems pushing the ship forward at velocities that should have crushed any organic crew. But Sarah was protected by the same technology that powered her weapons, held safe within fields that bent space itself around her. The Zephyrian scouts opened fire first, their energy beams lashing out across the darkness. The weapons that could have vaporized a mountain struck the Defiance and simply vanished, absorbed by shield systems that existed in folded dimensions. Sarah's ship didn't even slow down. "Target the lead cruiser," Sarah ordered. "Fire quantum cannon array." The Defiance spoke with a voice of pure destruction. Beams of coherent energy that existed in 17 different dimensions simultaneously reached out and touched the Zephyrian cruiser Merciless Hunter. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, the massive ship simply ceased to exist, every atom in its structure converted to pure energy in an instant so brief that light itself could not keep up. The explosion lit up the space around the Imperial Formation, a miniature star that burned for several seconds before fading. When the light cleared, there was nothing left of the Merciless Hunter except a slowly expanding cloud of plasma. Silence filled the communications channels for several heartbeats. Then, chaos erupted as the Imperial fleet scrambled to respond to this impossible threat. Ships broke formation, weapons systems came online, and, suddenly, space filled with the deadly light of 100 different weapon types all firing at once. Sarah stood calm in the center of the storm, watching the enemy fleet tear itself apart in their desperation to destroy her. Energy beams passed harmlessly through her shields, missiles detonated uselessly against her hull, and kinetic rounds simply vanished into dimensional pockets that existed outside normal spacetime. "Deploying dimensional bombs," the AI announced. Small objects, each no larger than a human fist, launched from hidden ports along the Defiance's hull. They moved slowly compared to the energy weapons filling the space around them, drifting almost lazily toward the Imperial Formation. The Zephyrians largely ignored them, focusing their fire on the ship that had just destroyed one of their cruisers with a single shot. The first dimensional bomb reached a Zephyrian destroyer and simply passed through its shields as if they didn't exist. When it touched the hull, reality twisted in ways that hurt to perceive. The destroyer folded in on itself, its three-dimensional structure collapsing into a point of infinite density before rebounding into a configuration that existed in spaces between the known dimensions. 6 more ships died in the same manner over the next 30 seconds. Each death was unique, as the bombs interacted with the quantum fields that held matter together in different ways. One ship stretched across several light seconds before snapping back into a configuration that physics couldn't explain. Another turned inside out and began existing backward through time. A third simply divided into infinite copies of itself, each one slightly less real than the last. The Imperial fleet was learning what it meant to face humanity's final gift to the universe. The Defiance had been built with 3 years of concentrated human genius, every breakthrough and innovation that the species had ever achieved focused on a single goal. It was not just a ship but an expression of human determination to survive, to fight back, to ensure that their destroyers paid a price for their genocide. Admiral Zektar, commanding the Divine Wrath, finally found his voice. "All ships, fall back to defensive formation Omega. Deploy maximum firepower against the human vessel. It must not be allowed to escape." Sarah laughed, a sound that carried clearly over the open communication channel. "Escape? Admiral, you misunderstand. I'm not here to escape. I'm here to finish what you started." The battle was just beginning, and already the 9th Armada had lost 8 ships to a single human destroyer. As the massive Imperial formation began to regroup and bring their heaviest weapons to bear, Sarah Chen prepared to show them what humanity could accomplish when it had nothing left to lose. The stars watched in silence as the last guardian of humanity prepared to dance with death among the giants. Hashtag the last guardian, the dance of destruction. The Imperial Ninth Armada reformed into a defensive sphere around their command dreadnought, their most experienced formation for dealing with single-ship threats. Admiral Zektar had commanded this fleet through 17 major campaigns, crushing species after species with methodical precision. He had never encountered a vessel that could simply ignore the combined firepower of 300 Imperial warships. "Analysis complete, Admiral," reported his tactical officer. "The human vessel appears to be using technology that operates outside known physics. Our weapons are having no effect due to some form of dimensional shielding." Zektar's four eyes focused on the tactical display showing the lone human ship moving through his formation like a predator among prey. 8 of his vessels were already destroyed, their deaths so complete that not even debris remained. Impossible. No species has ever developed technology this advanced. The humans were barely spacefaring when we first encountered them. Nevertheless, Admiral, the evidence is clear. The vessel is approaching the heavy cruiser Starbreaker. Shall we order them to withdraw? Negative. If this human wants a fight, we shall give her one. Order all heavy cruisers to concentrate fire on the enemy vessel. And deploy the quantum torpedoes. If their shields work by dimensional manipulation, perhaps weapons that destabilize spacetime itself will prove effective. Aboard the Defiance, Sarah felt the ship shudder as massive energy beams struck her dimensional shields. The technology that protected her was humanity's greatest achievement, built from theories that had taken their best scientists decades to develop. The shields didn't simply block incoming energy but redirected it into folded dimensions where it could cause no harm to the ship itself. "Captain, the Imperial vessels are deploying quantum destabilization weapons," the AI reported. "These could potentially disrupt our dimensional matrix." Sarah nodded, her hands dancing across the holographic controls that let her interface directly with the ship's systems. "Then, we don't give them time to target us properly. Begin evasive maneuvers and prepare the Nova cannon for firing." The Defiance suddenly accelerated beyond anything the Zephyrians had ever seen, moving in patterns that seemed to ignore the basic laws of momentum and inertia. The ship twisted through space like a living thing, dodging between energy beams and missile salvos with impossible grace. The quantum torpedoes that might have disrupted its shields struck empty space where the ship had been nanoseconds before. Sarah felt the acceleration through her neural link rather than her body, experiencing the ship's movement as if she were flying through space herself. The enhanced reflexes that came with her cybernetic implants allowed her to process tactical information faster than any organic brain could manage. She wasn't just commanding the ship anymore but had become one with it, human intuition merged with artificial intelligence to create something greater than either could be alone. "Target acquired," she whispered, focusing on the heavy cruiser Starbreaker. Nova cannon, full power. The weapon that fired from the Defiance was unlike anything that had ever existed in the galaxy. Instead of simple energy or projectiles, it launched a controlled stellar collapse, a miniature black hole that existed just long enough to reach its target before exploding with the force of a dying star. The Starbreaker and the 2 destroyers flanking it vanished in a flash of light that briefly outshone the local sun. The shockwave from the explosion rippled through the Imperial formation, overloading shields and damaging systems on a dozen nearby ships. For the first time in the battle, Admiral Zektar felt something he had not experienced in decades of warfare: uncertainty. "How many ships have we lost?" he demanded. 11 confirmed destroyed, sir. 7 more showing significant damage. The human vessel appears to be completely undamaged despite taking direct hits from our most powerful weapons. Zektar studied the tactical display, his tactical mind working through possibilities. The human ship was clearly superior to anything in his fleet individually, but it was still just one vessel against 300. Surely there were limits to what even this miraculous technology could accomplish. "Order the fleet to disperse into hunter-killer groups," he commanded. "Force the human to divide her attention. She cannot be in all places at once, no matter how advanced her vessel." Sarah watched the Imperial fleet break apart on her displays, splitting into smaller groups that began moving to surround her position. It was a sound tactical decision, one that would have worked against any conventional threat. But the Defiance was not conventional in any sense of the word. AI, implement Protocol Omega, Sarah ordered. It's time to show them what humanity learned about warfare. Protocol Omega activated, Captain. Beginning dimensional multiplication sequence. The space around the Defiance began to ripple and fold as the ship's most exotic technology came online. Suddenly, there were 2 ships where there had been 1. Then, 4. Then, 8. Each one was identical to the original, each one solid and real and fully armed. The technique was called dimensional echoing, and it represented the absolute pinnacle of human theoretical physics. By creating stable folds in spacetime, the Defiance could exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. Each echo was not an illusion or hologram but a complete version of the ship existing in a slightly different dimensional frequency. Admiral Zektar stared at his tactical display in growing horror as the single human vessel became a fleet of 8 identical ships, each one as dangerous as the original. That's impossible, he breathed. The energy requirements alone would be astronomical. His science officer, a being whose species had been among the first conquered by the Empire, looked up from his instruments with something approaching awe. Admiral, I'm reading massive distortions in local spacetime. The human vessel appears to be drawing power directly from dimensional barriers. They've learned to tap the fundamental forces that hold reality together. The 8 versions of the Defiance moved with perfect coordination, each one targeting a different group of Imperial ships. Sarah's consciousness was spread across all of them, her awareness multiplied but not divided. She could feel every weapon charging, every shield adjustment, every evasive maneuver as if she were piloting 8 ships with 8 bodies. The hunter-killer groups that had been meant to overwhelm a single ship suddenly found themselves facing multiple opponents that could coordinate their attacks with impossible precision. Zephyrian vessels that had survived centuries of warfare were destroyed in seconds by weapons that turned the laws of physics into instruments of destruction. One group of Imperial ships attempted to ram the nearest Echo, thinking to overwhelm it with their combined mass. The Defiance Echo they targeted simply shifted into a higher dimensional frequency, allowing the Zephyrian vessels to pass harmlessly through it before shifting back and destroying them with point-blank quantum cannon fire. Another group tried to retreat, hoping to regroup at a safer distance. The pursuing Echo of the Defiance activated its dimensional drive and simply appeared behind them, having traveled through folded space in a time period too brief to measure. The retreating ships died before their crews even realized they were under attack again. Captain, the AI reported across all 8 ships simultaneously. Imperial casualties now stand at 43 vessels destroyed, 21 damaged. Our own systems remain at full efficiency. Sarah felt a grim satisfaction as she watched the proud Ninth Armada being torn apart by humanity's final creation. But she also felt something else, a deep sadness for what this moment represented. She was not just destroying ships but ending thousands of lives, even if those lives belonged to the beings who had destroyed her species. Admiral Zektar, she broadcast on open channels, her voice reaching every remaining ship in the Imperial fleet. You still have time to withdraw. Take your remaining ships and leave this system. Return to your empire and tell them what happens to those who commit genocide. The response came immediately, filled with the rage and pride that had made the Zephyrian Empire the scourge of the galaxy. The Empire does not retreat from primitives. We will destroy you and claim your technology for ourselves. All ships, converge on the enemy vessels. Show them the true power of the Imperial Navy. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of inevitability. She had offered them a chance to live, to learn from this encounter and perhaps become better than they were. They had chosen to continue the cycle of violence that had consumed her people. So be it, she whispered. The 8 echoes of the Defiance began to glow with an internal light as Sarah prepared to deploy humanity's most terrible weapon. The remaining Imperial ships, nearly 200 vessels strong, charged toward their positions with weapons blazing. It was a magnificent sight, the final assault of a proud military force that had never known defeat. It was also their last mistake. The dimensional echoes began to merge, reality bending around them as they occupied the same space from different dimensional angles. The Defiance became something beyond a ship, a focus point for energies that existed in the spaces between atoms, between thoughts, between the heartbeats of dying stars. Sarah Chen, the last daughter of Earth, prepared to show the Zephyrian Empire what humanity could accomplish when it stopped holding back. The real battle was about to begin, and the Ninth Armada was about to learn why some species were too dangerous to completely destroy. #The Last Guardian Genesis Protocol. The eight-dimensional echoes of the Defiance converged into a single point of impossible geometry, occupying the same space while existing in different dimensional frequencies. Sarah felt her consciousness expand beyond anything she had ever experienced as the ship's systems merged with forces that operated at the fundamental level of reality itself. "Captain," the AI's voice resonated through dimensions that had no names. "Genesis Protocol is now available. Warning, deployment will result in irreversible changes to local spacetime structure." Sarah opened her eyes and saw the approaching Imperial fleet through 8 different dimensional lenses simultaneously. The remaining ships of the Ninth Armada had formed a massive attack formation, their weapons charging with enough energy to crack planets. Admiral Zektar had committed everything to this final assault, believing that overwhelming firepower could defeat any defense. He was about to learn how wrong he was. "All ships, maximum firepower," Zektar commanded from the bridge of the Divine Wrath. "Concentrate fire on the center of the distortion. Whatever the humans are doing, we will not allow them to complete it." 200 Imperial warships opened fire simultaneously. Energy beams that could vaporize asteroids, missile salvos that could level continents, and experimental weapons that tore holes in space itself all converged on the point where the Defiance existed in multiple dimensions at once. The weapons struck and simply vanished, swallowed by dimensional fields that existed outside the normal flow of cause and effect. The massive energies that should have destroyed anything in the galaxy were absorbed and redirected into the growing maelstrom of folded spacetime that surrounded Sarah's ship. "Impossible," breathed the Zephyrian science officer aboard the command dreadnought. "The energy readings are off our instruments. That vessel is somehow converting our weapons into fuel for whatever they're building." Sarah felt the power flowing into the Genesis Protocol systems, every shot from the Imperial fleet making her stronger. The weapon that humanity had built into the Defiance was not just advanced technology but a fundamental rewriting of the laws that governed reality. It was powered by destruction itself, growing stronger with every act of violence directed against it. "Activate Genesis Protocol," Sarah commanded, her voice echoing across dimensions. Reality screamed. The space around the Defiance began to expand and contract in patterns that hurt to perceive, as if the universe itself were breathing. Stars in the distance flickered and changed colors as the fundamental constants that governed their fusion shifted and warped. The Imperial fleet found their instruments failing as the very concepts of distance and time began to lose meaning. From the twisted spacetime around Sarah's ship, something began to emerge. At first it appeared to be another vessel, but as it took shape the Zephyrians realized they were seeing something unprecedented. The Genesis Protocol was creating matter from pure energy, building a new ship from the quantum foam that existed between atoms. But this was not just any ship. It was a perfect recreation of a Terran battleship, one of the massive vessels that had defended Earth during the final siege. As the Imperial fleet watched in growing horror, more ships began to materialize. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, each one an exact copy of vessels from humanity's lost fleet. "Admiral," the tactical officer's voice cracked with disbelief, "I'm reading life signs aboard those ships." "Human life signs." The vessels appear to be fully crewed. Zektar's 4 eyes fixed on the display as a dozen human warships completed their materialization and began moving with the coordinated precision of a veteran fleet. "That's impossible. We killed them all. We watched their homeworld burn." Sarah's voice filled the communication channels, but now it was not alone. Hundreds of other voices joined her, the voices of every human who had died in the war, every captain who had gone down with their ship, every crew member who had sacrificed themselves for a species that was doomed to extinction. "The Empire believed death was the end," Sarah said, her words carrying the weight of collective human determination. "You were wrong. We learned to encode consciousness into quantum fields, to preserve the patterns of thought and memory in the structure of spacetime itself. Every human who died in your war became part of the Defiance, waiting for this moment." The materialized human fleet opened fire with weapons that should not have existed, technology that had been improved and refined by minds that no longer needed to worry about the limitations of flesh. Energy beams that existed in 17 dimensions struck Imperial vessels, passing through their shields as if they weren't there and dismantling their targets at the molecular level. Captain Marcus Webb of the recreated battleship Vengeance opened fire on the heavy cruiser blade of Empire. The Zephyrian vessel, which had participated in the destruction of the Mars colonies, simply ceased to exist as its quantum structure was unraveled by weapons that operated on principles the Empire had never encountered. Commander Lisa Rodriguez of the destroyer Phoenix Rising targeted the missile cruiser Deathbringer, the ship that had launched the final bombardment of Earth's major cities. The Imperial vessel folded in on itself and vanished into a pocket dimension where the concepts of matter and energy had no meaning. One by one, the ships of the Ninth Armada began to die. But these were not clean deaths like those that had come before. The resurrected human fleet was not just destroying the Imperial vessels but erasing them from existence, removing every trace that they had ever been real. It was as if the universe itself were editing out their presence from the cosmic record. Admiral Zektar watched his proud armada being systematically erased by ghosts made manifest, his tactical display showing ship after ship simply vanishing from existence. The few vessels that attempted to retreat found their path blocked by human ships that materialized directly in front of them, as if the dead were rising from space itself to claim their vengeance. "Admiral," his communication officer reported, his voice tight with panic, "I'm receiving surrender requests from 17 ships. They're requesting permission to abandon their vessels." For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Zektar considered retreat. The Ninth Armada was the pride of the Imperial Navy, the fleet that had conquered a dozen star systems and crushed every enemy it had faced. Watching it being dismantled by impossible technology wielded by the spirits of the dead was more than his rational mind could process. "All ships," he commanded, his voice heavy with the weight of inevitable defeat, "prepare to withdraw to hyperspace. We cannot fight enemies that exist outside the normal laws of reality." But Saracen had not spent 3 years planning her revenge only to let the architects of genocide escape. "AI, deploy the quantum net. No one leaves this system." The space around the battle suddenly crystallized, reality itself becoming solid as quantum fields locked into rigid patterns. The Imperial ships that had begun charging their hyperdrive systems found their engines failing as the fundamental forces needed for faster-than-light travel were held in stasis. They were trapped in a bubble of controlled spacetime with the resurrected dead of an entire civilization. "Admiral Zektar," Sarah's voice reached the command dreadnought with perfect clarity. "You destroyed our worlds, enslaved our people, and thought you had erased us from the universe. But humanity had one advantage you never understood. We remember. We remember every death, every destroyed city, every child who cried for parents that would never come home." The human fleet had surrounded the remaining Imperial vessels, their weapons charged but not yet firing. The ghosts of Earth waited in their impossible ships, judgment personified in quantum foam and directed energy. "The Empire will learn of this defeat," Zektar transmitted, his pride warring with the growing certainty of his own death. "They will send more fleets. Larger fleets." Sarah's laugh echoed across the communication channels, joined by the laughter of 1,000 dead humans who had found their voices again in the spaces between dimensions. "Let them come, Admiral. The Genesis Protocol doesn't just create ships and crews. It creates everything necessary to rebuild a civilization. While your empire celebrates its past victories, we'll be spreading across the galaxy, growing stronger with every system we reclaim." The truth of her words became visible as more shapes began to materialize in the space around them. Not just ships this time, but entire space stations, orbital factories, defensive platforms, and massive construction vessels. The Genesis Protocol was rebuilding human civilization from the quantum level up, using the energy of the Imperial fleet's own weapons to fuel the resurrection. "The age of the Empire ends today," Sarah declared. "The age of humanity's return begins." The remaining ships of the Ninth Armada faced a choice that no military force should ever have to make: surrender to ghosts made manifest, or die fighting enemies that existed beyond the boundaries of life and death. Admiral Zektar looked at his tactical display one final time, seeing his proud fleet reduced to fewer than 30 vessels surrounded by a growing armada of impossible human ships. His species had conquered the galaxy through superior technology and ruthless determination. But they had made one fatal error: they had assumed that death was permanent. "All ships," he transmitted to his remaining captains, "prepare for final battle. We die as warriors of the Empire. Sarah Chen, last daughter of Earth and commander of humanity's impossible fleet, nodded with something approaching respect. Then, you will die with honor, Admiral. The same honor we offered to every species the Empire destroyed. The final phase of the battle began not with the roar of engines or the flash of energy weapons, but with the quiet dignity of soldiers facing the inevitable. In the silence between heartbeats, between the spaces where reality folded and dreams became real, the last act of the Ninth Armada played out against the infinite backdrop of stars. The universe watched as the dead passed judgment on the living, and found them wanting. Humanity had returned from extinction, and they would not be destroyed again.